Well, folks, welcome to Rockposer Chats. Today's guest is one of those who's at the forefront of rock artist promotion and management here in the UK. So, Martin Jarvis, welcome to Rockposer Chats.
Nice to be here, Dan. How are you?
Pretty good, and yourself?
Well, looking out the window. Interesting working off your dining room table these days, but you get a chance to look out the window and all I can see is snow on the grass. So Christmas must be coming.
Oh, you can keep the snow. I don't want it.
I'm happy to have it.
Well, we're here today to talk about, obviously, your company, Fresh Start Company, is having a whole restructuring, rebranding. Brave decision at this time, obviously, with COVID and everything else going on?
Maybe, but the other way of looking at it is it's possibly the best opportunity and the best time to do it. It's the entire industry is just shut down. There's nothing going
Sure.
on. Yeah, okay, odd socially distanced shows here and there, but they don't really, they're not amounting to anything, and I think it's a false representation of how the industry is. So, to be fair, I think it's a great time because coming out the other side, the industry is going to have changed so much that to me it was the perfect opportunity and the perfect time to do it.
Where do you think the industry is going to head? I mean, as you said, and we all know, it's taken such a walloping this year. Even before all this, certain areas of the industry were struggling as it was.
Um, you could talk to ten different people and you'll get 10 different answers to this one. I think that I think coming out the other side of this, I think you'll see that the stranglehold that the big multinationals have on the industry is probably going to be loosened. And by that, I mean the Live Nations, the
Yeah.
AEGs, even the big agencies, like so the Paradigms, the UTAs, people like that, that have that kind of worldwide stranglehold. I think you'll find that that'll loosen a bit and there'll be more opportunities for independent agents. There'll be more opportunities for independent promoters. Independent venues is the one that the jury's out on that. We just they need the money, but if there's nothing going on, are they going to survive out the other side? So, I think from my point of view as an independent agent, I think the future's a little bit rosier. But we just need to make sure we got the venues there to help us through.
Well, that's the crunch, isn't it? Because let's face it, without the small independent venues, the new bands coming through are going to have nowhere to play.
This is part of the problem, and it has been for a number of
Yeah.
years. The major, again the majors, the AGs, the Live Nations of this world, they put on some great packages.
Sure.
You think of some of the packages that we've had in the UK over the last few years. Things like Alter Bridge Shine Down Hailstorm, or Blackstone Cherry Airborne Theory of a Dead Man, packages like that. Just as a couple of examples, slash Glenn Hughes. These are all great, but the difficulty with that is that there's no opportunity for new bands to come through.
Exactly.
You've got some great bands cutting their teeth on the independent, the grassroots venue circuit. But what opportunity have they really got to move on? We've only got a couple of bands in the UK that have really kind of making a step, like some Massive Wagons or those Damn Crows. Stone Broken prior to that were the ones that had the opportunity to kind of step up. But they've only got that entry level. There's nobody working to move them, to move them up. It's almost like you're playing safe on the headliners of the future.
Well, this is always the crunch. Let's face it. When you see festivals getting announced, some festivals you can more or less write down what the lineup's going to be before it's even announced. That's always
Pretty much.
that's always a tricky one. Which, okay, always going to have that crux of fans who are going to go to the festival regardless of who's playing, because it's more than just the bands playing. It's the whole package of meeting up with friends, etc. But as you said, getting those new bands in is always going to be the struggle. Do you feel that maybe government should give the smaller venues more support? Like, say, in someone like Sweden, who give an awful lot of support to young bands and smaller studios, etc.
Do you know, I think that's a bit of a political minefield, and don't really want to kind of start becoming quite political. I think that in the UK, the independent grassroots circuit, the freelancers, I think, have been let down or have fallen through the cracks. You can maybe argue that will happen everywhere, and it's just unfortunate. But it's it's an industry that contributes billions to the UK economy over a year, and I think a little bit more support. There is some money out there, and the Music Venues Trust have done an absolutely phenomenal job in banging on the door of number 10 and shouting very loudly and making some things happen. And Mark and his team down there deserve all the credit. Your next question would probably be, is it enough? No, it's not. But, is it ever enough? You say that about everything. Is there enough money for the health service, enough money for the education system, enough money for whatever it might happen to be? No, it's not. But I think we could spend an awful lot of time moaning about how nobody's doing anything for us. But we really got to get out there and help ourselves as well.
Absolutely. Well, let's step back from the minefield of politics.
Good idea.
Let's go all the way back in time. What got you into music in the first place? Was it a particular song, album, artist? Heard something that sibling or friend was playing?
Well, when I was at school, I had a friend who I was round at his house. He had an older brother, and I was round at his house one day, and I literally was coming out of the bathroom, passing the older brother's bedroom, and before you think this is going somewhere strange, it's not. Hear me out. And literally, he was playing Ian Gillan's New Orleans, which was the single that had just been released at that point, which will tell you how old I am. And I literally stopped in my tracks, ended up going in. He played it about 3 or 4 times for me, and that kind of got me into rock music. I mean, my parents weren't particularly musical. It wasn't that there was music playing in the house all the time prior to that. It was really from there that I then started building up a collection, and then not long after that there was a BBC TV broadcast of Status Quo Live at the NEC, which was for the Prince's Trust. They released a single off of that, and then I actually bought the single and picked up the Thin Lizzy Killers EP at the same time. Didn't have a clue who they were, but the front cover looked pretty cool. And it just kind of started from there.
Don't you think it was a lot, I don't know what the correct word would be. As you said there, you bought Killers without knowing anything about them.
Yeah.
Then, unless you maybe listened to the Friday Rock Show or picked up Kerrang or Sounds or what have you, that's the only way you got to hear stuff. You took a lot more music on a bit of a whim and a chance. You'd buy an album hoping it was going to be all right. You wouldn't probably do that now.
Well, you don't have to do that now. That's the thing with streaming, whether it be Amazon Prime, Spotify, whatever. You don't actually have to do that, because you can listen to a track, and you can add it to your playlist. You never need to go and buy the album. It's kind of, I remember I got into Jeff Healey.
Fantastic.
Because I literally, I can't remember the track that I heard, but I then went out and bought the album. Didn't know whether it was any good or not. But that was what you did back then. You bought, even stuff like AC/DC. When I bought Flick of the Switch, we heard the Nervous Shakedown single. We didn't know what the rest of the album was like, but you went out and you bought it. But as I say, these days people don't have to do that. You can literally listen to one song, never hear the rest of it. And I think people losing out on a lot I mean, Steve Lukather summed it up when he called it. He said it's the fast food. It's Mick music.
Yeah.
It's like fast food now. It doesn't mean anything to anybody,
I
and
do
that's
believe
sad.
it has lost a certain amount of its value. I guess for people of our generation, it still means a lot more. I think we're more inclined to go and actually buy an album. Um, Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I can only speak for myself. But I guess on the other side, with the likes of Spotify, or whatever, if you start playing a place, you might hear something which you've never heard before. So I suppose it's a double-edged sword.
It is a bit, and obviously there's not a lot of love for Spotify out there. Either, well, certainly not amongst the musicians, but at the end of the day, if somebody's getting to hear your music and it's through Spotify or through Amazon Music or whatever it might happen to be, they're still getting to hear your music. And okay, you might only get, 0.001 pence per play. But you think about it, you buy a CD for £10, and how many times will you listen to that CD? Work out how many times you've actually listened to every track, and then work out how much each track was worth. There's not a massive amount of difference, and that's probably opening up another can of worms. So I'll step back from there. But it's look, if it gives anybody the opportunity to hear music, anything's a good thing.
Indeed. Well, let's jump forward. What was your decision, or what made you decide to get into the whole music management promotion side of music biz? Because let's face it, a lot of people would probably go, whatever you do, don't ever go into that. If you value your hair, stress, family life.
Well, firstly, just to clarify, I'm not a promoter. That's one thing I don't do. I leave that to the experts, and there's a lot of great people out there that do that. I just have real difficulty, applying myself to anything else for any length of time. That's the bottom line. It's kind of I get bored, So I gotta do something that keeps me entertained.
How long have you been doing it now as a company before you've obviously got to this point?
Um, well, I booked my first proper run of dates in 2003. I was working with somebody else who's still a very good friend, and we put dates together for Vanilla Fudge. So that was 2003. Wasn't the most successful tour, which kind of puts it mildly. But yeah, from there, that's when I started booking shows. I mean, prior to that, I'd done a bit of this, that, and the next thing. But that was when I started. It was kind of part time at that point. 2004, it became a bit more, and it's just moved on from there.
And obviously we're at the point now where let's get to the crux, which is obviously the restructuring, rebranding. Why have you decided to do that? Obviously we discussed the timing of it, but why have you decided to do the rebranding and the splitting of the two sections?
I think, as we'd mentioned before, Dan, I set up the Fresh Start company, sort of very quickly. I'd been working as an agent on a franchise agreement, and I'd basically taken back the business myself.
Okay.
I'd started managing a really cool young act, and so that's why I set up the Fresh Start company at that point, and it kind of was all encompassing. But just as time's gone on, there's been odd occasions where I felt that the lines were a little bit blurred between what you do as an agent, what you do as a manager, consultant, or if I was doing some production work or some touring stuff. The lines were getting a little bit blurred, and it just made a lot of sense to try and create more defined lines. The agency is the lifeblood of what I do. It has been for so long. So that's why it's been branded as On Point Touring. or rebranded. Everything else that we do between management, the consultancy work that we do, whether we do any production stuff or touring work, it falls under a separate banner. They're a bit more connected. So I keep them all badged under 1266 Music.
When it comes to the consultancy side of things, what kind of support is this? Support to new artists or existing artists?
Really, whoever needs it. It's I mean, the great thing about consultancy work is no 2 days are the same. Or no two jobs are the same. Some, if you've got a more established artist, they might just need a bit of consultancy support, a bit of support with maybe an album release or maybe sorting out a merchandising campaign. A younger act might need their hands held from the second they get out of bed in the morning. So it really depends.
Are you encouraged by the number of sort of newer and younger bands that are coming through on the British scene? Because there is a lot of it sort of getting grouped under this new wave of British classic rock, or whatever you want to call it. But there seems to be, a real resurgence, certainly in the last maybe 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy and his team have done a fantastic job in spreading the word. I mean, I first got to know of Jeremy when, say, the band I was managing, he set up a fan group,
right?
And then he was setting up fan groups to a lot of different acts, and then that moved into the new wave of classic rock Facebook group and the campaign from there. And I think he's done an incredible job. But it's kind of strange to me because classic rock is defined by that era. Classic rock is your Saxons, your Motorheads, your AC/DCs, bands like that, in the same way as Iron Maiden and Def Leppard were classed as new wave of British heavy metal. It's kind of strange to have a new wave of classic rock. It's almost a bit of a contradiction, but I think it does the job, which is great. It is encouraging about the amount of acts that are out there, and the way things are these days, with the fact that everybody, if they've got half an idea how to use a computer, and they can play an instrument, they can record an album on Logic, Pro Tools, or even GarageBand. So my only concern with it is that because everything's now so, if you like, cottage industry, where's the quality control?
This is the thing.
And I think that's the problem. And then you get to that situation of people complaining that the record labels don't give support to new bands. But the difficulty is that there's so many new bands out there. They're all doing it. It's like I say, where is the quality control?
It's certainly interesting when you speak to different people in the industry. I saw Ruben Archer saying to someone who was asking about record labels and suggestions, saying, "What do you want a record label for? Do it all yourself. Why are you giving money away?" And yet you've got the other side. Certain record labels will certainly support an artist and point them in the right direction. I guess it depends who the artist is, as you were saying.
Very much so. I mean, I understand Ruben's point of view, but at the same time, do you know how much money it takes to actually properly release and market an album by yourself? Take Thunder as an example. 2002 through 2009, all their albums were self-released on their own record label. Danny Bowes managed the band, ran the record label, handled the marketing, nearly gave himself a nervous breakdown just with the stresses involved. But but finding that money up front, who pays for the marketing campaign, who pays even just for the CDs to be pressed, whilst the bands pretty much have to find the money for the studio time these days, record labels still have their uses. They have large databases that they can market to. They've got in-house marketing teams or external marketing teams that can promote your album for you. That money has to be recouped. I don't have an issue with that. I think the biggest problem is that people negotiate badly the deals.
Yeah.
That's the problem. They either take what's on offer, they don't negotiate properly, or they're so desperate to be famous that they don't question anything until it's too late.
That's what I was going to say. Certainly, I know young bands, they've been offered a record deal, and I won't say by any particular label or what have you. And the excitement of getting that, and shouting all over social media that we've got this deal, and you think, yes, but does it work for you? You're just looking at, I'm with such and such.
It's an interesting one, and I've had a conversation with, the amount of people that contact me asking me if I'll get involved with them one way or another. But I do turn it down. But a lot of it is, we've got ourselves into this really bad record deal, we want out of it. And I said, well, what, do you have another deal? What's your alternative? Oh, we don't have another offer. I said, well, to that end, if it's the only offer that you've got, is it really a bad offer? It's a slightly different way of looking at it. But I do know 2 or 3 labels that have a kind of blanket policy of just signing people, but there's not a massive amount of marketing or strategy goes into it. It's kind of almost just, we'll throw it out there and hope for the best. And interestingly enough, most of the bands that the 2 labels I'm thinking of in particular that have signed over the last few years, the bands have either broken up because they've realised that there's no money involved, and it's caused them to fall out, or the bands that move to the next level have done it by leaving that label behind and moving on.
Yeah.
And I think that's an instance where the labels maybe need to look at their business model and say, maybe we need to change our model slightly dependent on the act. This kind of one size fits all just doesn't work. Back in the days when record labels invested a massive amount of money in acts in terms of development and had a lot of faith in them, every deal was done to suit the needs of that particular act and the campaign that they thought that they would need, and and everything. It wasn't just a case of, there it is, sign it and off we go.
I guess they're blasé because they know that there's going to be another 10 acts following behind them.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And that's maybe the one negative bit to the whole sort of new wave of classic rock era. Everybody thinks that they can, that they can put an album out and, that makes them famous. And realistically, it doesn't. As I say, there's no quality control. We've got some great acts in there, but the danger is that they can get lost in amongst a large amount of generic acts. All those bands that they see, for example, Alter Bridge or Blackstone Cherry are doing the business right now, so they want to be the next Alter Bridge or Blackstone Cherry, or any band with a female at the front of them wants to be the next Hailstorm, for example. That's where it all falls wrong. You've got to find your own thing.
I feel there's a real. I was going to say, I feel there's a real danger, certainly with some of the bands coming through. I'm no expert. I'm just talking as a fan point of view from what I hear. There's a real danger that you're getting almost into the end of the late 80s, early 90s sort of, and I hate the phrase, but I'll use it, hair metal era, that suddenly they all sound the same, and it's to close your eyes. Sorry, who's this again?
Very true. That, I mean, that's a fair point. And if you think back to the British rock scene, when do you reckon was the last real breakthrough time for the British rock scene?
Probably 94, 95.
Well, possibly. I'll go back a little bit earlier than that. I'd say, sort of
I was being
between
generous. I'd probably say
89.
92 if I had a push.
Yeah. What did you have then? You had Thunder coming through, the Choir Boys, you had the Almighty, you had Gun, you had Little Angels. There's just five bands that all kind of came through roughly the same time.
Yeah.
But, every one of them was different. They weren't trying to be the same as everybody else. The Choir Boys were the new faces, if you like. Thunder were that kind of Bad Company vibe. Little Angels were Britain's answer to Bon Jovi. The Almighty had that kind of punkier vibe about them. Gun had that kind of they were different. They weren't all kind of tight jeans and big hair kind of stuff. It was almost not biker, but it was a little bit more almost James Dean in their kind of vibe. But all those five bands carved their niche in the market in the UK because they were all a bit different. They weren't, that's not happening now. Too many of the bands are all the same.
I think, as you're saying, they're all different, but all quintessentially British.
Yeah,
there's an underlying British sound. Now, all those bands I've seen numerous times over the years, and I've seen some of them on the Monster Rock cruise, where the Americans absolutely lapped them up because they never got a chance to play in the States in the day. Yeah, they got close, but they never quite made it, and suddenly they're there, and there's a real love for British rock.
I mean, the Monsters of Rock cruise is very much a niche thing. It was started by Cinderella's tour manager because it was an outlet for Cinderella because they didn't want to go out and play the casino circuit because they wanted, they couldn't afford to. So he did the cruise and he brought all, and it's developed a life of its own, and it's a fantastic thing. And I mean, I've booked numerous bands on it over the years. I've got a few pending for the next couple. It's great, and again, but you're right in terms of what you say. There's an element of a lot of that kind of hair metal that is very samey, but we've got that same problem just now with a lot of the new wave of classic rock. We've got a lot of bands that if you close your eyes, you couldn't distinguish one from another.
That's what worries me.
And it is quite worrying because, as I say, I think there's some great bands out there that are doing something a little bit differently, but they're not. But they really run the risk of not getting heard because there's just too much white noise in front of them. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful to anybody who's out there doing their thing, but it's a bit of a reality check. Not everybody can be the next arena headliner.
Indeed. Well, hopefully, after the year from hell, everyone's had a chance, like yourself, to have a rethink. Maybe, bands can look at relaunching themselves and think, actually, we can see where we need to go now because we haven't been able to rely on A, B, and C. So hopefully, maybe next year, he's saying fingers crossed, because God knows what's going to happen at the moment, we're going to see some kind of explosion of new talent and maybe some new directions and some new blood, and just I think, let's face it, fans are biting at the bit at the moment to get out and see live music again, and certainly obviously bands wanting to play it.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And I think I think the phrase post-COVID is going to is going to mean a lot, especially in our industry. You hear it in America a lot, that whole phrase of post 9/11. It's like that was the date that the world changed.
Yeah.
I think again post COVID, that's the date the world changes. It becomes almost like ground zero, and it gives people an opportunity to think, when you're sitting around not doing anything, it's a great leveler. You've got a great opportunity to think.
Exactly.
And the smart ones should be thinking about it, looking at what's not been right, what they could do differently, and actually what they want. And I think a large part of that starts with the reality check-in amongst yourself. If you are in a band and you're playing maybe a couple of Saturday nights a month, and you have a full-time job and everything else, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But don't be calling yourself a full-time working band, because you're only kidding yourself. And if you do that, you can then lose sight of actually what your opportunities are. Sometimes if you stay, the script. If you stare at something too long, you lose sight of what you're actually looking at.
Yeah.
And so hopefully we will. As I say, there's some great bands out there that if they just took a bit of time, sat back and thought about what they were doing and what they want to achieve, and stopped trying to jump on a bandwagon, they stand more of a chance. And as I said, there's some phenomenal talent out there. There's some really cool new bands that are just starting to scratch the surface, haven't stuck their head above the parapet yet, but they're, give them another 6 months and they'll be ready to do that.
Well, Martin, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. All the best for your future endeavours.
Thanks, Dan.
I say, hopefully things will pan out a lot better for all of us the other side of Christmas. He says, fingers crossed, fingers and toes. But we can only be positive at the end of the day. And let's face it, without music, and certainly without music this year, life would have been an awful lot more miserable.
Well, that's certainly very true. I've been able to sit down and actually watch some of my DVD collection. It's certainly been interesting. As I say, this is the first summer and the first Christmas that I'll actually be at home over the whole period and over the build-up without either being out touring or have festival runs or just anything else going on. It was, it was good. It was a nice summer because it gave me the opportunity to actually sit in the garden for the first time in about 10 years. I don't really want to have to do that again, but because we'll be back working. But time will tell. That's the main thing. We've just got to kind of dig in and keep cracking on. There's some good news with the vaccine. But we have to be realistic.
Exactly.
It's going to be many, many months before it really makes a difference. So we're not talking about live shows back in January and February. It's going to be the other side of the summer before we really start seeing any massive difference.
Lovely stuff. Martin, thanks very much indeed.
Pleasure, Dan. I'll see you again soon.